Welcome back. We are in our last section and we are going to continue talking about those critical supports in your virtual classroom, focusing specifically on feedback, acknowledgement, and responding to behavior. So, once we've established our expectations and we've created a plan to teach and revisit those expectations in all of our necessary settings, we need to ensure that we're acknowledging and encouraging the behavior when we see it. So, why is acknowledgement and recognition so important? Well, first, that we know that in order to learn any new skill, whether it be academic or behavioral, human beings require regular and frequent feedback. Similar to what you probably heard in the neurosequential trainings, repetition is important in regulating for our students. So when we are teaching students, we are literally helping them create associations in order to make new synaptic connections and make new meaning. So we are trying to strengthen the pathways for expected and desired behavior through this regular acknowledgement and recognition. And then last but not least, we know that kids are getting all sorts of feedback all day long. So if we are not emphasizing the positive feedback around desired behavior, they will seek other feedback that sometimes can shape those undesired behaviors. So many of you have probably heard of this 4-to-1 ratio, which is what numerous research studies have identified as the number of positive interactions that people, not just students, must receive in relation to negative interactions they encounter as they learn and practice new skills. So, this idea of frequent positive feedback isn't just around behavior. It was also highlighted in John Hattie's research around high leverage instructional practices, as well as instructional research done by Dr. Terry Scott. And what has been found in all of this research is the use of positive feedback, whether it be instructional or behavioral in nature, is critical to maintaining motivation. And research tells us that high rates of positive to negative feedback, this 4-to-1 ratio, is one of the most high leverage practices we can be using in our classrooms in order to increase our positive student outcomes. And this extends again to both academic and behavioral outcomes. So we recognize that at first glance, providing 4 positive interactions to every corrective interaction can seem challenging, and especially when we apply that to the virtual space. So we wanted to give you some ideas on how to bring this practice to reality in your classroom, because we know that just like students, the more we are practicing, the easier the specific positive praise and feedback is going to become for us as adults. And the good news is that there are several ways to deliver acknowledgement to students, even in the virtual classroom, which is going to support that relationship development and also increase that likelihood of positive behaviors. So, first and foremost, keep that matrix handy and make sure kids have an easy way to refer back to it and see it as well. And think about providing specific praise related to those behavioral expectations and classroom routines. So, remember that that specific positive praise requires naming the specific behaviors the student or group of students displayed and how that behavior connects to the classroom expectations. If you find that it's challenging to ensure that you are acknowledging all of your students regularly and equitably, we recommend choosing a certain number of students before the class begins that you want to make sure you are acknowledging in that time together. And even going so far as to rotate students each session, making sure you're getting to everyone. And you can do that acknowledgement in the classroom or through individual outreach after class, because sometimes it can be hard to do in the moment depending on the lesson you're teaching and how you're teaching it. But always remember that the more immediate that feedback is, the more you're going to support those synaptic connections and help make those behaviors more second nature for students. And then also think about how you can really get your students to engage in this acknowledgement as well. So if you perhaps want to work on a specific behavior expectation for your class for perhaps that session or day or week, think about how students may be given opportunities to acknowledge each other with shout outs of when and where and how and who they saw their peers meeting this expectation. That can be another great routine and way to build that sense of community. So this is certainly not an exhaustive list, but hopefully just some strategies for you to consider when you think about the online space. And then just to really wrap up this section, again, wanting to leave you with some final considerations around this feedback and acknowledgement. So as mentioned, consider ways to ensure you're providing feedback that's positive, precise, and definitely age appropriate. We want this feedback to feel authentic for our students. And remember that feedback can be around behavior and academic goals. Um, Interact more frequently with every student when they're engaged in that positive behavior rather than when they're engaged in that negative behavior, right? And be thinking about who we're interacting with and how we're doing that with all of our students as much as possible. And then plan ahead. Again, it can be challenging to figure out how to do this on a regular basis. So don't be afraid of being creative and coming up with ways to celebrate not only individual students, but also your class as a whole. And if you feel like a behavior is especially challenging, it may be something that the class can work on and is a great opportunity to create some class-wide goals and celebration opportunities. And then just one last note that if you are a school that's using a reward system in conjunction with this specific positive praise, know that there are some easy tweaks to make this applicable in the virtual space. And we have a resource related to this on our website. But as always, those rewards or tokens or points, whatever you're doing, should be tied to that specific verbal positive praise. And really what we say in our PBIS space is that those rewards are really to serve as reminders for us as adults to be giving that praise and acknowledgement. So just remember, we always want those to be paired together if we are indeed using any sort of rewards. So we know that our most high leverage strategies for preventing the unwanted behavior are going to be those that are proactive and positive in nature. However, no matter what we do, there will definitely be times when we are going to have to respond to misbehaviors in our classroom, and that is the same for the virtual space. Most of you I know had some exposure to a virtual classroom in the spring and are therefore aware of some of the more frequent misbehaviors that may have shown up in your classroom. And so we encourage you to be thinking through how you might respond to those misbehaviors before they occur, as well as what expectations are tied to those behaviors and may need some extra attention and teaching and practice to avoid those same sort of pitfalls as we go back to school this fall. Also remember that when we are correcting any behavior, we want those responses and redirects to be as brief, calm, and consistent as possible, which is going to increase the chance that you are able to maintain your instruction and that relationship remains intact. It also has the greatest likelihood of helping students remain regulated and probably keeping you regulated as well. And then do some planning for when and how you are going to reteach those expectations and or perhaps offer more additional support in teaching for students who may be struggling with meeting those expectations in your classroom. So, not just what you'll do and when, but also how you may access additional support from your building if you determine that that is something that's needed. So all considerations we really want to be thinking about in a preventative way so that we are more prepared to respond to those misbehaviors when and if they happen. And as promised earlier, there are some additional resources that you are going to find in your virtual classroom as well to support all that we've talked about related to expectations, routines, misbehaviors, and just questions and to consider in this space. So in review, we wanted to quickly remind you of everything we discussed in our short time here together. We began today with reviewing those critical Tier 1 practices for returning to school, those being connecting, screening, support, teaching, and monitoring. We discussed the importance of connection before the year begins, and especially in those first weeks and months of school, and provided you with some strategies to try on in your own classroom. We provided considerations for the way in which your virtual classroom is structured and discussed how those procedures, routines, and expectations support one another and your classroom. We reviewed the way and why of behavior expectations, as well as discussed the importance of clearly defining, teaching, and practicing these. We followed up with the importance of providing specific positive feedback and acknowledgement related to those expectations, and provided you with some strategies to make these easier and more equitable in your classroom. And last but not least, we provided you with some considerations regarding misbehavior, because we know that even when we seemingly do everything right, misbehavior is, possibly will occur. And we provided you with a toolbox of resources and supports to further your thinking and planning in all of these areas. Wanted to provide you with some final steps as we close out this portion of the course. So we ask that you complete the final reflection that you'll find in Google Classroom, and also complete your note catcher, and you'll be able to turn both of those in within the Google Classroom in order to get credit for taking this course. It will also be your attendance. We also have a Jamboard linked to your Google Classroom, and we would love for you to take a moment to visit it and add any connection strategies that you either tried in the spring and found successful, or something you're thinking about trying, and just add that to the board. We will be compiling all of those and creating a sort of shared resource for the district. So the more the merrier in that space. And then for the last 30 minutes of this hour and a half session, please feel free to join our system support specialists at the Zoom link in the Google Classroom. And we will be there to answer further questions or provide any more specific support that you may possibly need. And that'll, again, be the final 30 minutes of this course. And always know that we are here to support you in any way that we can. We know that this is uncharted territory for all of us, and we appreciate all of your hard work and wish you the best for this coming school year. And again, please reach out and always check out our MTSS AuroraK12.org website, where we will continue to update our resources to support you in the virtual classroom and in your in-person learning as well. Thank you so much.